The harsh winter wind howled like a wounded animal as Vanessa Grant struggled against the unforgiving snowstorm. Her fingers numb inside her gloves, and her vision obscured by the swirling white that surrounded her. It was 1887 in Nevada Territory, and what had begun as a simple journey from Carson City to visit her aunt in Goldfield had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Vanessa had always prided herself on her independence. At 24, she had defied convention by traveling alone after her father's passing 6 months prior, determined to make her own way in a world that expected women to be merely decorative accessories to men. But now, as her rented horse collapsed beneath her, exhausted and freezing, she wondered if her stubborn nature would be the death of her. "Come on, boy," she urged the trembling animal, tugging at its reins. "We must keep moving." But the horse whinnied pitifully and refused to stand, its breaths coming in clouded puffs in the frigid air. Vanessa knew she couldn't remain still. To do so meant certain death in these temperatures, but the snow had risen past her knees, and each step forward was a battle against nature itself. "Help!" she called out, her voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. "Is anyone there? Please?" She trudged forward, leaving her horse behind with a silent promise to send help if she survived. The snowfall increased, pelting her face with icy shards that felt like tiny knives against her skin. Her heavy wool coat, once a source of warmth, now hung on her frame like a sodden blanket, weighing her down with each laborious step. Time lost all meaning as Vanessa pushed forward. 1 hour. 2. She couldn't tell. The sky was a uniform gray, offering no hint of the sun's position. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and her lungs burned from the cold air. When she finally stumbled and fell face first into the snow, she lacked the strength to rise again. "I'm sorry, Aunt Martha," she whispered, her consciousness fading as the snow began to cover her prone form. "I tried." The darkness was almost welcome when it came. Vincent Vaughn had seen many winters in his 32 years, but few as merciless as this one. Born in Texas and raised by the saddle, he drifted northward over the years, working cattle drives, breaking horses, and occasionally serving as a guide for travelers crossing the dangerous terrain between settlements. The Nevada Territory had become his home for the past 5 years, and he knew its moods better than most. Today, those instincts had told him to stay put at his small cabin outside Goldfield, but the urgent message from town about medical supplies needed for old Mrs. Perkins had compelled him to saddle up despite the threatening skies. Now, on his return journey with the laudanum safely delivered, he was battling the worst blizzard he'd encountered in years. His stallion, Thunder, was a sturdy beast accustomed to harsh conditions, but even he struggled against the rising snowdrifts. Vincent leaned forward in the saddle, patting the horse's neck encouragingly. "Just a few more miles, boy," he murmured. "Then it's a warm stable and extra oats for you." As they crested a small rise, Vincent squinted through the swirling snow, something catching his eye in the distance, an unnatural shape against the white landscape. Curiosity piqued. He guided Thunder closer, expecting perhaps a fallen tree or abandoned wagon. What he found instead made his blood run cold. A horse lay dead or dying in the snow, and nearby, a mound that had the unmistakable shape of a human body, already half buried in the accumulating powder. "Whoa, Thunder," Vincent commanded, dismounting swiftly despite the deep snow. He trudged toward the human-shaped mound, his heart pounding. Too many good people had been claimed by the unforgiving western wilderness, and he feared he'd found another victim. Dropping to his knees, Vincent began clearing snow away with gloved hands, revealing a woman's form. Her face was pale as porcelain, lips tinged blue, dark lashes resting against white cheeks. For a terrible moment he thought he was too late, then he saw the faintest cloud of breath escape her lips. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" He gently tapped her cheek, brushing snow from her hair and face. She was beautiful, even in this death-like state, with delicate features and rich auburn hair escaping from beneath a snow-crusted bonnet. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. A small moan escaped her lips, the most welcome sound Vincent had heard in ages. With renewed urgency, he continued digging her out of the snowdrift, working methodically to free her without causing injury. The snow had formed an icy crust around her, and he had to be careful not to hurt her as he chipped away at her frozen prison. "Don't you worry," he said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "I'm going to get you out of here." After several minutes of careful digging, he'd freed her enough to attempt moving her. Vincent slid his arms beneath her and lifted, surprised at how light she felt despite her sodden clothing. Her head lolled against his chest, and he tucked her closer, trying to share what warmth he could. "Hold on to me," he said firmly as her eyes opened briefly, revealing irises the color of summer grass. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe." Her fingers weakly clutched at his coat as consciousness briefly returned, then faded again. Vincent carried her to Thunder, who stood patiently waiting, and somehow managed to mount while still holding her. He settled her in front of him, cradling her against his chest, and wrapped his heavy buffalo hide coat around them both. "It's a good thing I found you, miss," he said, though she couldn't hear him. "This storm's only going to get worse before it gets better." With one arm securing the unconscious woman and the other on the reins, Vincent urged Thunder forward. His cabin was closer than town, and in this weather, every minute counted. The horse seemed to sense the urgency of their situation, and pushed forward with renewed determination, powerful legs plowing through the deepening snow. Vincent kept his face close to the woman's, monitoring her breathing. It was shallow but steady. A good sign, but hypothermia was a treacherous enemy, and he knew the danger wasn't past. He'd seen strong men succumb to the cold even after being brought indoors if their bodies cooled too severely. "Stay with me," he murmured, his breath warming her cheek. "We're almost there. Just hold on." The journey to his cabin seemed interminable, but finally, the sturdy log structure appeared through the curtain of snow, a beacon of hope in the white wilderness. Vincent had never been so grateful to see its smoke-billowing chimney, evidence that the fire he'd banked before leaving was still alive. Getting her inside was a challenge, but Vincent managed to dismount while still holding her, staggering slightly under her weight as his cold-numbed legs adjusted to standing. He kicked open the door, carrying her directly to the bed near the fireplace, the warmest spot in the one-room cabin. "First things first," he muttered, working quickly to build up the fire, adding kindling and logs until it roared to life. Then he turned his attention to the woman. She was soaked to the skin, her clothing frozen in places. Vincent knew what needed to be done, though propriety made him hesitate. She would die in those wet clothes, but the thought of undressing an unconscious woman he'd never met. "No choice," he decided aloud. "Your life's worth more than your modesty, miss." With as much respect as he could manage, Vincent removed her outer garments, then her sodden dress and petticoats, averting his eyes as much as possible while still doing what needed to be done. He left her in her chemise and drawers, though they too were damp. After quickly retrieving one of his clean flannel shirts and a pair of wool socks, he dressed her in these much too large garments, then wrapped her in every blanket he possessed. Only then did he remember Thunder, still outside in the storm. With a guilty start, Vincent hurried out to lead the faithful horse into the small attached lean-to that served as a stable. He removed the saddle and bridle, rubbed the animal down with dry straw, and provided fresh water and a double portion of oats. "You earned it today, boy," he said, patting Thunder's flank before returning to the cabin. Inside, the woman hadn't moved, but the blue tinge was slowly fading from her lips, replaced by a healthier pink. Vincent prepared a pot of strong coffee, then sat beside the bed, watching her breathe and wondering who she was, and what had driven her out alone in such dangerous weather. It was nearly an hour later when she finally stirred, her eyelids fluttering open to reveal those remarkable green eyes again. She stared at the cabin ceiling in confusion before her gaze found Vincent. "Where?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're safe, madam," Vincent replied, leaning forward. "My name's Vincent Vaughn. Found you half buried in a snowdrift about 3 miles east of here. My cabin's outside of Goldfield." "Goldfield," she repeated, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I was going to Goldfield, my aunt." "Easy now," Vincent cautioned as she tried to sit up. "You nearly froze to death out there. Need to take things slow." She sank back into the pillows, her eyes never leaving his face. "My clothes." A flush crept up Vincent's neck. "Had to get you out of them, madam. They were soaked through. I was respectful as I could be. You're wearing my shirt now, and I've hung your things by the fire to dry." She nodded slowly, accepting this explanation. "Thank you, Mr. Vaughn, for saving my life. I'm Vanessa Grant." "Miss Grant," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Might I ask what you were doing traveling alone in this weather?" Vanessa's eyes clouded with emotion. "I was visiting my aunt in Goldfield. Martha Holloway. Do you know her?" Vincent nodded. "Everyone knows Mrs. Holloway. Respected lady, runs the boarding house on Pine Street." "Yes, that's her," Vanessa confirmed, relieved. "I was coming from Carson City. The weather was clear when I set out 3 days ago, but yesterday it turned suddenly. The driver of the stagecoach warned we couldn't make it all the way to Goldfield, so I rented a horse in Silver Springs to continue. I thought I could make it before the storm worsened." Vincent shook his head, equal parts impressed and dismayed by her determination. "That was a brave decision, Miss Grant. Foolhardy but brave." A faint smile touched her lips. "My father always said I had more courage than sense." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," she said softly. "He passed away 6 months ago." Vincent's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." Vanessa looked away, blinking rapidly. "Thank you. After he died, there was nothing keeping me in Boston. Aunt Martha invited me to stay with her while I figure out what comes next." Vincent rose and poured a cup of coffee, adding a generous amount of sugar before bringing it to her. "This will help warm you from the inside. Can you sit up a bit?" He helped her into a semi-reclined position, propping her up with pillows, then placed the steaming mug in her hands, which were still trembling slightly. "My horse," she said suddenly, looking alarmed. "He collapsed in the snow, is he?" Vincent's expression gave her the answer before he spoke. "I'm afraid he was already gone when I found you, Miss Grant. Nothing could have been done for him." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "Poor creature, he tried so hard." "Nature can be merciless out here," Vincent said quietly. "It's why folks don't travel alone if they can help it, especially not in winter." She sipped the coffee, wincing slightly at its strength. "I've learned that lesson now, Mr. Vaughn, I assure you." "Vincent," he corrected her. "If we're going to be snowed in together for a spell, might as well use first names." Her eyes widened. "Snowed in? For how long?" Vincent moved to the window, pushing aside the hide covering to reveal a world of white. The snow was still falling heavily and the wind howled around the cabin corners. "Hard to say. Could be a day, could be 3. This storm's got a mind of its own." He turned back to her, his expression grave. "We're safe here. Got plenty of firewood, food stores, water, just have to wait it out." Vanessa looked down at the oversized shirt she wore, then at the small cabin with its single bed, and a blush spread across her cheeks as the impropriety of their situation dawned on her. I see," she said, her voice strained. "My aunt will be worried sick." "Nothing to be done about that now," Vincent said practically. "No one's traveling in this, not even to deliver messages. But folks in these parts understand weather delays. She won't think the worst just yet." Vanessa nodded slowly, then attempted to stand. Vincent was at her side immediately, supporting her elbow when she swayed. "Easy there," he cautioned. "Your body's been through an ordeal." "I just need a moment of privacy," she explained, her blush deepening. Vincent nodded in understanding. "Of course. The outhouse is buried in snow by now, but there's a chamber pot behind that screen in the corner. Take your time. I'll see about fixing us something to eat." He busied himself at the small stove, giving her privacy while she made her way carefully to the screened corner of the cabin. When she emerged, she looked somewhat steadier on her feet, though still pale. "You should rest more," Vincent advised, guiding her back to the bed. "Your body needs to recover." "I've imposed enough," she protested. "I can't take your bed." Vincent shook his head firmly. "It's not an imposition when I'm the one insisting, Miss Gr. Vanessa. I've slept on harder surfaces than my cabin floor many a night, and with that injury to your ankle, you need the comfort more than I do." Vanessa glanced down, noticing for the first time the swelling at her right ankle. "I must have twisted it when I fell." "Likely so. It's not too bad, but best to stay off it." Vincent returned to the stove, where he was preparing a simple stew with dried meat and preserved vegetables from his stores. "Food will be ready soon. Simple fare, I'm afraid. Not what a Boston lady might be used to." "I'm not so delicate as all that," Vanessa responded, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "And I'm in no position to be particular, considering you saved my life." Vincent glanced over his shoulder with a smile that transformed his weathered face, softening the lines around his eyes. "Fair enough." Vanessa studied him as he worked, taking in details she'd been too disoriented to notice earlier. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin that spoke of years outdoors. His hair was dark, almost black, worn longer than was fashionable in Eastern circles, and a neatly trimmed beard covered his jawline. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to physical labor, his hands large and capable as they worked. He was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way that was entirely different from the refined gentleman of Boston society. There was something honest about his features, something trustworthy in those dark eyes. "Have you lived in Nevada long?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "About 5 years now," Vincent replied, stirring the pot. "Before that, I was all over. Texas, Montana, Wyoming. Wherever the work took me." "And what work is that?" "Bit of everything. Cattle driving, horse breaking, guiding. These days I mostly trap in winter, hunt and guide in summer. Do some trading with the mining camps," he shrugged. "It's a living. You live here alone?" Vanessa asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that was forward of me." Vincent smiled again. "No offense taken. And yes, just me and Thunder, that's my horse. Never found much reason to settle down proper like." He brought over 2 bowls of the steaming stew, handing one to her. "Careful, it's hot." Vanessa accepted the bowl gratefully, suddenly aware of her hunger. The stew was simple but flavorful, the meat tender and the broth rich with herbs. "This is delicious," she said after a few bites, genuinely surprised. Vincent sat on a wooden chair near the bed, his own bowl balanced on his knee. "Man living alone learns to cook or he eats poorly." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling wind outside. Vanessa felt strength returning to her limbs with each spoonful, though exhaustion still weighed heavily upon her. "Tell me about your aunt," Vincent said eventually. "Martha Holloway is well respected in Goldfield, but keeps to herself mostly." Vanessa smiled fondly. "Aunt Martha is my father's sister. She came west as a young bride but lost her husband to mining fever, not the gold, but the illness from the mines. She's run that boarding house for 20 years now. Writes the most wonderful letters, full of adventure and frontier spirit. I've always wanted to visit, and after Father died." She trailed off, then continued more softly. "I needed a change." "Loss has a way of uprooting us," Vincent observed quietly, "making us seek new ground to plant ourselves." The simple wisdom of his words struck Vanessa deeply. Yes, exactly that. Boston held too many memories, too many sympathetic looks from people who didn't truly care. Too many suitors suddenly interested in the daughter of Joseph Grant, now that his shipping business would pass to his heir. "Vultures circling," Vincent nodded understanding. "Precisely." Vanessa set aside her empty bowl. "I needed to breathe different air, see different skies. Father always encouraged my independence, even when society frowned upon it. Coming west felt like honoring that part of him." "It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind," Vincent said, "whether folks think it's sensible or not." Vanessa studied him, sensing there was personal experience behind his words. "Is that what you did? Left everything familiar?" A shadow passed over Vincent's features. "Something like that. Texas holds memories I prefer not to revisit." His tone discouraged further questions, and Vanessa respected the boundary. They all had chapters they preferred to keep closed. Outside, the storm intensified, snow pelting the window coverings and wind finding every tiny crack in the cabin's construction. Despite the fire's warmth, Vanessa shivered. "You should rest," Vincent said, taking her empty bowl. "Your body's been through an ordeal." Vanessa wanted to protest, but found she lacked the energy. Her eyelids felt impossibly heavy, and the bed's warmth was too inviting to resist. "Perhaps just for a little while," she conceded. "I'll be right here if you need anything," Vincent assured her, adding another log to the fire. As Vanessa drifted toward sleep, she was comforted by the steady presence of this stranger who had become her rescuer, this rugged cowboy with gentle hands and quiet strength. Her last conscious thought was that perhaps, just perhaps, fate had guided her into that snowdrift for a reason. The night passed with Vincent sleeping on a bedroll near the fire, rising occasionally to add wood to the flames and check on his guest. Vanessa slept deeply, her body recovering from its brush with death, waking only briefly when fever dreams disturbed her rest. Each time, Vincent was there with water or reassuring words, his deep voice anchoring her to safety until sleep claimed her again. When morning came, it arrived without sunlight, the storm still raging outside. Vanessa woke feeling stronger but disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The sight of Vincent at the stove, his back to her as he prepared breakfast, brought the previous day rushing back. "Good morning," she said, her voice still rough from sleep. Vincent turned, a genuine smile lighting his face. "Morning. How are you feeling?" Vanessa took inventory of her body. The bone-deep chill had receded, though her muscles ached and her ankle throbbed dully. "Better, thank you, though I'm not sure I could outrun a tortoise at the moment." Vincent chuckled, the sound warm and pleasant in the cozy cabin. "No need for running today, storm's still going strong." "Looks like we're keeping each other company for at least another day." He brought her a cup of coffee and a plate with Johnny cake and what appeared to be preserved peaches. "Not exactly a Boston breakfast, I reckon." "It looks wonderful," Vanessa assured him, accepting the plate gratefully. She was ravenous, her body demanding fuel to continue its recovery. While they ate, Vincent explained more about his life in the Nevada territory. He'd built this cabin himself 3 years ago, choosing the location for its proximity to a reliable spring and good hunting grounds, yet still within reasonable distance of Goldfield for trading. "Most folks think I'm half wild," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile, "living out here alone. But I prefer the quiet. Towns get too cramped for my liking." "I can understand that," Vanessa said. "Though I've always lived in cities, I've often longed for more space, more freedom. In Boston, a lady's life is prescribed from birth: whom to speak with, how to dress, when to marry. Even how to breathe, it sometimes seems." Vincent studied her thoughtfully. "And is that why you're here, looking for freedom?" Vanessa considered this. "Perhaps, or perhaps simply looking for a place where I can decide my own fate, not have it decided for me." "The West can offer that," Vincent acknowledged, "though it comes with its own hardships, like blizzards," Vanessa suggested with a wry smile. "Among other things," he agreed, his eyes crinkling. "But yes, blizzards certainly make the list." After breakfast, Vanessa insisted on helping with the dishes despite Vincent's protests. Her ankle still pained her, but she could stand with care, and the activity felt good after being bedridden. "I warn you," she said as he reluctantly handed her a dish towel, "I'm not particularly skilled at domestic tasks. Our housekeeper in Boston would probably faint at the sight of me attempting to be useful." Vincent laughed. "Dishes aren't complicated. Just try not to break anything. My dining set's limited as it is." As they worked side by side in the small space, Vanessa became acutely aware of Vincent's physical presence. His sleeve occasionally brushed hers, and she caught the scent of him: leather and wood smoke, and something uniquely male. It was disconcertingly pleasant. "So," Vincent said as they finished, "with that ankle you should stay off your feet, but I reckon you're not the type to sit idle all day." "You reckon correctly," Vanessa confirmed. "I brought a book in my saddlebag, but—" She trailed off, realizing her possessions were lost in the snow along with her horse. "I've got books," Vincent offered, surprising her. He crossed to a small shelf and returned with several well-worn volumes. "Not much for fancy literature, but I do enjoy reading on long winter nights." Vanessa accepted the books, her estimation of this cowboy rising further. The collection was eclectic. A volume of Whitman's poetry, a dog-eared copy of The Last of the Mohicans, a practical guide to wilderness survival, and several dime novels with lurid titles about Western adventures. "Quite a variety," she observed, smiling at the dime novels. Vincent rubbed his neck, looking slightly embarrassed. "Those are just for entertainment. Don't believe half of what they write about the West in those things." "You mean desperados don't lurk behind every cactus?" Vanessa teased, holding up Six-Gun Justice, The Reckoning. "Shockingly, no," Vincent replied with mock seriousness. "And most cowboys spend more time chasing stray calves than outlaws." Vanessa laughed, a genuine sound that brought unexpected warmth to Vincent's chest. He'd been alone so long that he'd forgotten how pleasant it could be to share his space with another person, especially one with quick wit and an easy smile. The day passed in comfortable companionship. Vanessa read while Vincent attended to various tasks around the cabin, mending a bridle, sharpening knives, checking his supplies. Occasionally, they would exchange observations or questions, learning more about each other in these casual conversations than they might have in formal settings. Vanessa learned that Vincent had left Texas at 20 after his parents died of fever, that he'd worked his way north on cattle drives, that he could speak passable Spanish and a smattering of Paiute words, and that he had an almost encyclopedic knowledge of Western plants and their uses. Vincent, in turn, discovered that Vanessa was the only child of a wealthy shipping merchant and his socialite wife, that she'd attended a prestigious ladies' seminary but found it stifling, that she could play piano beautifully but hated needlepoint with a passion, and that she harbored secret dreams of writing adventure stories set in the West. "So that's why you're so interested in everything," Vincent said when she admitted this ambition. "You're collecting material." Vanessa smiled. "Perhaps, though I'm finding the reality quite different from my imaginings. Better or worse." She considered this, watching him across the small cabin as he worked. Different, more complex, more real. As evening approached, Vincent prepared another meal, this time a rabbit stew that had been simmering slowly all afternoon. The rich aroma filled the cabin, making Vanessa realize how much she'd come to appreciate his simple but flavorful cooking. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" she asked as they ate. "Trail drives, mostly," Vincent replied. "Cookie, that's what we called the trail cook. Took a liking to me my first drive. Said I had good hands for cooking, whatever that means. Taught me a few things before his rheumatism got too bad and he retired." "He taught you well," Vanessa complimented. "This is delicious." A pleased expression crossed Vincent's face. "Kind of you to say so. Don't get many chances for someone else to enjoy my cooking." After dinner, as the storm continued its assault on the cabin, they sat near the fire. Vincent had fashioned a cushioned seat for Vanessa using his saddle and some blankets, elevating her injured ankle as he'd insisted was necessary. "Will you read something?" he asked unexpectedly. "Been a long while since I heard a story read aloud. My mother used to when I was young." Touched by the request, Vanessa nodded. "Of course, any preferences?" "Your choice," he said, settling back in his chair. Vanessa selected Whitman's Leaves of Grass, finding a passage she particularly loved. Her voice, cultured from years of elocution lessons, filled the cabin with the poet's vivid imagery. She glanced up occasionally as she read, finding Vincent watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. When she finished, a comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire and howling wind. "You read beautifully," Vincent said finally. "Makes the words come alive somehow." "Thank you," Vanessa replied, oddly pleased by his simple praise. "Would you like me to continue?" Vincent shook his head. "Your turn to listen. Don't know any poetry, but I know stories, true ones mostly." And so he began, his deep voice painting pictures of the West. He'd known tales of cattle stampedes under lightning-split skies, of friendships forged in the crucible of wilderness survival, of breathtaking vistas that made a man feel simultaneously insignificant and immortal. He spoke of desert sunsets that bled crimson across the horizon, of star-filled nights so clear you could almost touch the heavens, of the profound silence of mountain forests blanketed in snow. Vanessa listened, entranced. Here were the authentic details no dime novel could capture, the true essence of Western life told by someone who'd lived it. Vincent was no polished orator, but his words carried the ring of truth, and his obvious love for this harsh, beautiful country shone through every description. When he finally fell silent, Vanessa realized she'd been leaning forward, completely absorbed in his storytelling. "You're the one who should be writing books," she said softly. "You make it all feel so immediate, so real." Vincent looked embarrassed by her praise. "Just telling what I know." "That's exactly why it's compelling," Vanessa insisted. "It's authentic, not like these." She gestured to the dime novels. "Though I admit they're entertaining in their own way." Vincent smiled. "They pass the time, and sometimes it's amusing to read how Easterners imagine our lives out here." "Well, Now I have first-hand experience to inform my writing, Vanessa said. Being trapped in a snowdrift certainly wasn't in my plans, but it's provided excellent material. Is that all this is to you? Vincent asked, his tone light but with an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. Material for your stories. Vanessa met his gaze. No, she said honestly. It's much more than that. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of the unusual connection that had formed in their short time together. Vincent looked away first, rising to add more wood to the fire. It's getting late, he observed, and you need rest to continue healing. Vanessa nodded, suddenly aware of her fatigue. Yes, you're right. Vincent helped her to the bed, his hands strong and steady as he supported her weight. When she was settled, he checked her ankle once more, his touch gentle as he examined the swelling. Looking better, he pronounced, but still needs time. Fortunately, the storm's giving us plenty of that. He retreated to his bedroll on the floor, a respectful distance from the bed. Good night, Vanessa. Good night, Vincent, she replied, watching as he extinguished all but one small lamp. In the dim light, she studied his profile as he settled down to sleep. This man was becoming less of a stranger with each passing hour, and the realization both thrilled and frightened her. What was happening to her heart in this small cabin, cut off from the world by walls of snow and wind? Sleep was long in coming that night, despite her physical exhaustion. The storm raged for 2 more days, during which time Vanessa and Vincent established a simple routine. Mornings began with breakfast and coffee, followed by quiet activities: reading, mending, talking. Vincent taught Vanessa to play an old card game called Pedro, which she quickly mastered, much to his amusement. They shared stories of their lives, gradually filling in the sketches they'd drawn of each other with richer details and deeper understanding. Vanessa learned that Vincent had a younger brother somewhere in California whom he hadn't seen in years, that he'd once considered becoming a doctor before life intervened, and that despite his solitary existence, he regularly brought supplies to elderly residents around Goldfield who couldn't make the journey to town themselves. Vincent discovered that Vanessa had defied her father by secretly taking classes in literature and history at a women's college in Boston, that she volunteered at an orphanage despite her mother's objections to her mingling with unfortunates, and that she could whistle better than most men, a skill taught to her by a scandal-prone aunt who'd been the family's black sheep. By the afternoon of the 3rd day, Vanessa's ankle had improved enough for her to move around the cabin without assistance, though Vincent still insisted she rest it frequently. The forced proximity in the small space should have been uncomfortable, but instead, they developed an easy rhythm, moving around each other as if they'd been sharing the cabin for years rather than days. It was during dinner on that 3rd evening that they first heard it, the subtle shift in the storm's sound, a lessening of the wind's ferocity. Listen, Vincent said, raising his head. It's easing. Vanessa listened, recognizing the change. Does that mean it's ending? Likely by morning, Vincent confirmed, his expression unreadable. We'll probably be able to make it to town tomorrow if the snow's not too deep for thunder to manage with both of us. Oh. Vanessa was surprised by her own lack of enthusiasm at this news. Part of her had grown comfortable in this snowy isolation, this private world they'd created together. That's good news. Your aunt will be relieved, Vincent said, his tone carefully neutral. She's probably been worried sick. Yes, of course, Vanessa agreed quickly. And I'm imposing on your hospitality. You're not, Vincent said firmly. Not at all. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, acknowledgement, perhaps, that neither was eager for their time together to end. Later that evening, as Vincent banked the fire for the night, he spoke without turning. "What will you do after you reach Goldfield?" Vanessa, already settled in bed, considered the question. "Stay with my aunt as planned, at least for a while." She paused. "And you, will you return here?" Vincent nodded. "It's home, such as it is." "It's a good home," Vanessa said softly. "Warm, safe." Vincent looked around the simple cabin as if seeing it through her eyes. "It's enough for one person." The unspoken possibility hung in the air between them. Vanessa's heart beat faster, but she didn't have the courage to pursue it. Not yet. "Good night, Vincent," she said instead. "Good night, Vanessa," he replied, his deep voice gentle in the dimming light. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the cabin windows for the first time since Vanessa's arrival. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape pristine white as far as the eye could see, with drifts piled high against the cabin walls and trees sagging under their snowy burdens. Vincent was already up when Vanessa woke, having cleared a path to the stable and checked on Thunder. He returned as she was folding the blankets from her bed, stamping snow from his boots. "Clear day," he announced. "Cold, but the sun strong. Should melt the top layer enough to make travel possible by midday." "That's good," Vanessa replied, trying to sound more enthusiastic than she felt. Vincent began gathering supplies for the journey: extra blankets, food, his rifle. "It's about 7 miles to Goldfield from here." Normally an easy ride, but with two on Thunder and these conditions, it'll take a few hours. Vanessa nodded, moving to help him. Her clothes, long since dried by the fire, had been returned to her the previous day. Now she wore her own dress again, though she'd grown fond of Vincent's oversized flannel shirt during her recuperation. "I can't thank you enough," she said as they worked, "for saving my life, for your kindness." Vincent paused, looking at her directly. "No thanks needed." "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Vanessa disagreed. "Not everyone would have. Many would have left me, or—" She didn't finish the thought. They both knew the dangers a woman alone faced in the West, even from those who claimed to offer help. Vincent's expression softened. "Well, then I'm glad it was me who found you." "So am I," Vanessa said softly. They prepared in companionable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts about what would happen when they reached Goldfield. By mid-morning, they were ready to depart. Vincent helped Vanessa onto Thunder's back, then mounted behind her, his arms encircling her waist as he took the reins. "Hold on," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. Vanessa leaned back slightly against his solid chest, allowing herself to enjoy the secure feeling of being in his arms. As they set off through the snow-covered landscape, she tried to memorize everything: the scent of him, the strength of his embrace, the rhythm of Thunder's gait beneath them. The journey to Goldfield was as challenging as Vincent had predicted. Thunder struggled through snowdrifts that sometimes reached his chest, and their progress was slow. But the day was clear and bright, the snow-covered mountains stunning against the vivid blue sky. "It's beautiful," Vanessa breathed, taking in the winter scenery. "This country shows its true nature after a storm," Vincent agreed. "Harsh but honest, doesn't pretend to be gentle but rewards those who respect its power." They talked intermittently as they traveled, conversations punctuated by long, comfortable silences. As Goldfield's buildings appeared in the distance, Vanessa felt a curious mix of relief and regret. "My aunt's boarding house is on Pine Street," she reminded Vincent, "near the assayer's office." Vincent nodded. "I know it. Mrs. Holloway runs a respectable establishment." The town was quieter than usual, many residents still digging out from the blizzard. A few people stopped to stare as they passed, likely wondering about the woman riding double with the reclusive trapper who rarely came to town except to trade. When they reached the boarding house, a tidy two-story building with green shutters. The door flew open before Vincent could even help Vanessa dismount. Martha Holloway, a sturdy woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair, rushed down the steps. "Vanessa, my dear girl. We've been frantic with worry." She embraced her niece tightly as Vincent helped her down from Thunder. "The stage arrived without you 3 days ago, and with the storm." She pulled back, examining Vanessa from head to toe. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "I'm fine, Aunt Martha," Vanessa assured her. "Thanks to Mr. Vaughn, he saved my life." Martha turned her attention to Vincent, who stood awkwardly holding Thunder's reins. "Mr. Vaughn," she acknowledged with a nod. "I'm forever in your debt for bringing my niece safely to me." "No debt, madam," Vincent replied, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "Just glad I happened along when I did." "You must come in," Martha insisted. "Have a hot meal, tell me what happened." Vincent hesitated. "Thank you, madam, but I should be getting back." Thunder's tired, and there's still plenty of daylight for the return journey. Vanessa felt a pang of disappointment at his refusal. Was he so eager to return to his solitude? "At least let me pay you for your trouble," Martha offered, reaching for her purse. "No," Vincent said firmly. "It wasn't trouble, and I won't take payment for helping someone in need." Martha studied him, then nodded. "Very well. But the offer of a meal stands whenever you're in town, Mr. Vaughn. My boarding house serves the best food in Goldfield, if I do say so myself." "I've heard as much," Vincent acknowledged with a small smile. He turned to Vanessa. "Miss Grant, I'm glad you're safely delivered to your family." Vanessa stepped forward, suddenly desperate to prolong their goodbye. "Mr. Vaughn, Vincent, I can't express my gratitude adequately." Vincent's dark eyes held hers. "No need to try. Take care of that ankle, it still needs rest." "I will," she promised. For a moment they stood looking at each other, both seemingly reluctant to part. Then Vincent touched his hat again, mounted Thunder, and with a final nod to both women rode away. Vanessa watched until he disappeared around a corner, her heart heavy with unspoken words. "Well," Martha said, her tone curious as she observed her niece's face. "It seems you have quite a story to tell me." Vanessa turned to her aunt, summoning a smile. "Yes, quite a story indeed." Inside the boarding house, warm and comfortable and filled with the delicious smells of baking, Vanessa recounted her ordeal, the failed stagecoach journey, her ill-fated decision to continue on horseback, the sudden worsening of the storm, and finally, her rescue by Vincent. Martha listened attentively, her eyes widening at the more harrowing parts of the tale. "You could have died out there, child," she said when Vanessa described being buried in the Snowdrift. "It's a miracle Mr. Vaughn found you." "It was," Vanessa agreed softly. "I still don't know why he was out in such weather." "Delivering medicine to old Mrs. Perkins, most likely," said a voice from the doorway. A slender woman with kind eyes entered, carrying a tea tray. "I'm Sarah Perkins, her daughter-in-law. Mr. Vaughn brought laudanum for my mother-in-law's rheumatism the day the storm hit. Said he'd promised and wouldn't let the weather stop him." "That sounds like him," Vanessa said, remembering his mention of the errand. Sarah set down the tray and poured tea for them all. "Vincent Vaughn is something of a mystery in Goldfield. Keeps to himself mostly, but always helps when needed. Some think him odd for living so far from town, but he's respected." "He mentioned bringing supplies to elderly residents," Vanessa said. "He seems very kind." "Kind but solitary," Martha observed, watching her niece's face carefully. "Some say he's running from something, though no one knows what. Others think he just prefers his own company to that of townsfolk." Vanessa thought of the comfortable silence they'd shared in the cabin, the easy conversation that had developed between them. Perhaps a bit of both. After Sarah left, Martha turned to Vanessa with an assessing look. 4 days alone with a stranger in a cabin. Should I be concerned about your reputation, my dear? Vanessa blushed. He was a perfect gentleman, Aunt Martha, saved my life and treated me with nothing but respect. Martha patted her hand. I never doubted it. Vincent Vaughn has a reputation for integrity, whatever mysteries surround him otherwise. She paused. But I see something in your eyes when you speak of him. He's different from anyone I've known, Vanessa admitted. There's a depth to him, a genuineness I've rarely encountered. And handsomeness doesn't hurt, Martha added with a knowing smile. Vanessa's blush deepened. No, it doesn't. Well, Martha said, rising, you've had quite an adventure to begin your Western life, but now you need rest. Dr. Simmons will want to check that ankle when he makes his rounds tomorrow. That night, in the comfortable guest room that would be hers for the foreseeable future, Vanessa found herself unable to sleep despite her comfortable surroundings. She missed the sound of the fire crackling in Vincent's cabin, the steady rhythm of his breathing across the room, missed his deep voice telling stories of the West, the quiet companionship they'd shared. Would she see him again? Goldfield wasn't so large that their paths wouldn't cross. But would he seek her out, or return to his solitary existence as if their days together had meant nothing? Vanessa wasn't sure which possibility troubled her more. Days passed, settling into a routine at Martha's boarding house. Vanessa helped her aunt with the guests, mostly minors, and the occasional traveling salesman serving meals, changing linens and keeping the books. Her ankle healed completely, and she began exploring Goldfield, familiarizing herself with the dusty streets, modest shops, and colorful characters that populated the mining town. She made friends with Sarah Perkins and several other women her age, attended church services on Sundays, and even joined the town's small literary society, which met monthly to discuss books few members had actually read. It was a simpler life than Boston's, but she found she enjoyed it, the straightforward nature of the people, the lack of pretension, the sense of community that bound the town together. But through it all, her thoughts returned frequently to Vincent. She found herself watching the street whenever she was near a window, hoping for a glimpse of his tall figure. Each time the boarding house door opened, her heart leapt with anticipation, only to sink when the newcomer wasn't him. 2 weeks after her arrival in Goldfield, Vanessa was returning from the general store when she finally saw him. Vincent was emerging from the blacksmith shop, leading Thunder, who sported new shoes. He wore the same buckskin jacket she remembered, his dark hair partially covered by his wide-brimmed hat. Her heart hammered as she approached. "Mr. Vaughn," she called. He turned, and the smile that broke across his face sent warmth flooding through her. "Miss Grant," he greeted, touching his hat brim. "You're looking well. Thank you. I am fully recovered thanks to your care." Vanessa gestured to his horse. "And how is Thunder? Fit as ever. Just needed new shoes for the spring mud that's coming." Vincent studied her face. "And how do you find Goldfield?" "Charming in its way," Vanessa replied. "Very different from Boston, but the people have been kind. Aunt Martha keeps me busy at the boarding house." Vincent nodded. "Mrs. Holloway runs a tight ship. Best meals in town, they say." An awkward silence fell between them, so different from the comfortable quiet they'd shared in the cabin. Will you be in town long today?" Vanessa asked finally. "Just finishing my trading," Vincent replied. "Need to head back before dark." Disappointment flooded Vanessa. "Of course." "I understand." Vincent shifted, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Miss Grant, Vanessa, I've been meaning to call at the boarding house, to check on your recovery." Hope sparked in her chest. "You would be most welcome. Aunt Martha has expressed her desire to thank you properly numerous times." Vincent nodded, seeming to come to a decision. Perhaps I could stop by before I leave town, if that wouldn't be an imposition. It wouldn't, Vanessa assured him quickly. Not at all. Another pause filled with unspoken words. I should let you continue your errands, Vincent said finally. But I'll come by the boarding house later if that's agreeable. Very agreeable, Vanessa confirmed, smiling. I'll tell Aunt Martha to expect you for dinner. She walked away feeling lighter than she had in days, a smile playing at her lips. He hadn't forgotten her. The connection she'd felt hadn't been imagined. Martha was delighted when Vanessa returned with news of their dinner guest. About time that man accepted some hospitality, she declared, immediately planning an elaborate meal. And perhaps this will give you a chance for proper conversation, without the threat of freezing to death hanging over your heads. Vanessa blushed. Aunt Martha, please. He's simply being courteous by checking on my recovery. Of course, dear, Martha replied with a knowing smile. And I'm simply being courteous by serving my best beef roast and apple pie. The boarding house dining room was busy that evening, filled with regular boarders and several townspeople who often took their evening meals there. When Vincent arrived, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt under his buckskin jacket, several heads turned in surprise. The reclusive trapper rarely socialized in town. Martha greeted him warmly, insisting he take the seat of honor at their private table. Mr. Vaughn, we're delighted you could join us. I've been hoping for a chance to thank you properly for saving my niece. Vincent looked uncomfortable with the attention but managed a polite nod. As I told Miss Grant, no thanks are necessary. Anyone would have done the same. Perhaps, Martha allowed, but not everyone would have succeeded, nor would just anyone have provided such careful attention during her recovery. Vanessa, seated across from Vincent, watched a flush creep up his neck at her aunt's praise. Aunt Martha, you're embarrassing Mr. Vaughn, she chided gently. Nonsense. A man should be recognized for heroic deeds, Martha declared, but she mercifully changed the subject as the food was served. Now, Mr. Vaughn, Vanessa tells me you've lived in the territory for 5 years. What brought you to Nevada initially? Over the excellent dinner, Vincent gradually relaxed, answering Martha's questions about his life with the same quiet thoughtfulness Vanessa remembered from their days in the cabin. He spoke of coming west after his parents' deaths, of working various jobs before finding his place in the mountains and forests of Nevada. And you never considered a more conventional life, Martha asked. A business in town, perhaps, or a ranch? Vincent shook his head. Tried conventional once or twice. Didn't suit me. His eyes flickered to Vanessa. Or so I thought. Martha didn't miss the glance, nor the slight coloring of her niece's cheeks in response. A speculative look crossed her face, but she didn't pursue the subject. After dinner, Martha suddenly remembered urgent correspondence that required her attention, leaving Vanessa and Vincent alone in the small parlor adjacent to the dining room. Your aunt is about as subtle as a grizzly bear, Vincent observed with unexpected humor once Martha had gone. Vanessa laughed. She means well, and she truly is grateful to you. As I've said, yes, I know, no thanks necessary, Vanessa finished for him with a smile. You're a modest man, Vincent Vaughn. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the ease of their cabin days returning. How have you been? Vanessa asked finally. These past weeks, Vincent considered the question. The cabin's quieter than I remembered, he said simply. The admission sent a flutter through Vanessa's chest. I've missed our conversations, she confessed. Goldfield has many fine people, but few who appreciate Whitman. A smile touched Vincent's lips. Been reading to thunder, but he's not as appreciative an audience as you were. Vanessa laughed, then grew serious. Will you tell me something, Vincent? Why have you stayed away these 2 weeks? You must come to town occasionally for supplies. Vincent looked down at his hands. Wasn't sure I'd be welcome. Your aunt's a respectable woman. Thought perhaps she'd prefer you not associate with a rough trapper who lives alone in the mountains. She thinks very highly of you, Vanessa corrected him. As do I. Their eyes met, and Vanessa saw something vulnerable in his gaze, hope perhaps, or longing that matched her own. I should go, Vincent said abruptly, rising. It's getting dark and the trail, must you? Vanessa interrupted, standing as well. Aunt Martha would be happy to offer you a room for the night. The boarding house isn't full. Vincent shook his head. Thank your aunt for the meal. It was the finest I've had in years, but I should return home. Disappointment washed over Vanessa, but she nodded. Of course, will you? Will you come to town again soon? Vincent paused at the door. I think I might, he said softly, if I'd be welcome at the boarding house. Always, Vanessa assured him. After he'd gone, Martha found Vanessa still standing in the parlor, staring at the closed door. An interesting man, your Mr. Vaughn, she observed. He's not my Mr. Vaughn, Vanessa protested automatically. Isn't he? Martha questioned with a raised eyebrow. I saw the way you look at each other. Something happened between you in that cabin besides survival, my dear. Vanessa sighed, unable to deny it. Something did, but I don't know what it means or if it can lead anywhere. He values his solitude, his independence. As do you, Martha pointed out. Perhaps that's part of what draws you to each other. Perhaps, Vanessa agreed thoughtfully, but it hardly seems enough to build a future on. Martha squeezed her niece's shoulder affectionately. The heart has its own wisdom, Vanessa, sometimes wiser than the head. Give it time. Over the following weeks, Vincent began making regular visits to Goldfield, always stopping at the boarding house. Sometimes he joined them for meals. Other times, he and Vanessa simply walked through town together, talking as they had in the cabin. Occasionally, when weather permitted, they rode into the surrounding countryside, Vincent on Thunder and Vanessa on a gentle mare she'd purchased with money her father had left her. On these rides, Vincent showed her the beauty of the Nevada wilderness, hidden valleys where wildflowers bloomed in profusion, crystal clear streams teeming with trout, ancient pine forests where sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden shafts. He taught her to recognize animal tracks, to identify edible plants, to navigate using the sun and stars. Goldfield buzzed with speculation about the blossoming relationship between the Boston lady and the reclusive trapper. Some disapproved, considering Vincent too rough and uncivilized for a woman of Vanessa's background. Others, particularly those who had benefited from Vincent's quiet generosity over the years, were supportive. Vanessa paid little attention to the gossip. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free to choose her own path, her own companion, without society's expectations weighing upon her. And with each day that passed, each conversation shared, each smile exchanged, she grew more certain of her feelings for Vincent. But uncertainty remained about his intentions. While his affection was evident in 100 small ways, the gentleness of his hands when helping her mount her horse, the way his eyes sought hers across a crowded room, the thoughtful gifts he sometimes brought, a wildflower pressed between pages of Whitman, a perfectly shaped arrowhead he'd found. He never spoke of the future, never declared himself openly. Spring advanced, the snow melting from the mountains, meadows bursting into colorful bloom. Vanessa had been in Goldfield nearly 3 months when Vincent invited her to ride with him to a special place he wanted to show her. It's about an hour's ride, he explained. A place I found my first year here. Not many know about it. They set out early on a perfect May morning, the air crisp but warming with the promise of the day's heat to come. Vincent led her along a narrow trail that wound through pine forests and across meadows starred with wildflowers. Finally, they emerged onto a ridge overlooking a small, perfectly circular lake, its waters so blue they mirrored the sky above. "It's breathtaking," Vanessa gasped, reining in her mare beside Thunder. "Local Paiute call it Spirit Eye," Vincent explained. "Say it's where the earth watches the sky." They dismounted, leaving the horses to graze on the abundant grass while they walked to the lake's edge. Vincent spread a blanket he'd brought, and they sat together, enjoying the peaceful beauty of the place. "I've never shown anyone else this spot," Vincent said after a while, his voice quiet. "It's where I come when I need to think, when decisions need making." Vanessa turned to look at him, sensing the importance of this admission. "And do you have decisions to make now?" Vincent nodded, his expression serious. "Important ones." He took a deep breath. "Vanessa, these past months since I found you in that Snowdrift, they've changed me." Her heart quickened. "Changed you how?" Made me question things I thought I knew about myself, about what I want from life. He looked out over the lake, gathering his thoughts. "After my parents died after some difficulties in Texas, I convinced myself I was better off alone, safer that way. For 5 years, that belief served me well enough. And now," Vanessa prompted when he fell silent. Vincent turned to her, his dark eyes intense. "Now I find myself thinking about a future that isn't solitary, thinking about sharing my life with someone who understands both the need for independence and the value of connection." Vanessa's breath caught. "Vincent, let me finish," he requested gently. "I'm not a wealthy man, Vanessa. Don't have much beyond my cabin, my horse, and the skills I've learned. Can't offer you the kind of life you knew in Boston. But if you could be content with what I can provide, with a life that has its hardships alongside its joys, I'd be honored to build that life with you." Tears sprang to Vanessa's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Vincent Vaughn?" A smile touched his lips. "In my clumsy way, yes, I am." Vanessa didn't hesitate. "Then my answer is yes, 1,000 times yes." Vincent's eyes widened as if he'd expected rejection. "You're certain? It won't be an easy life." "I've never been more certain of anything," Vanessa interrupted. "The life I knew in Boston was comfortable but empty. What I've found here with you is real. It has meaning. That's worth more than all the comforts in the world." Vincent reached for her hands, holding them in his larger ones. "I love you, Vanessa Grant. Have since those days in the cabin, I think, though it took me time to admit it even to myself." "And I love you," Vanessa replied softly. "Enough to face whatever hardships come our way." Vincent lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her fingers with a reverence that brought fresh tears to her eyes. Then slowly, he leaned forward and kissed her properly, a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as Vanessa responded with all the feeling in her heart. When they finally parted, both breathless, Vincent smiled. "Seems I should have done that weeks ago." "Better late than never," Vanessa teased, her heart overflowing with happiness. They spent the day by the lake, talking of their future together, making plans. Vincent spoke of improvements he wanted to make to the cabin: a proper bedroom, a larger kitchen, eventually additional rooms as their family grew. Vanessa shared her ideas for a garden, for bringing books and music into their home, for perhaps starting a small school for the children of outlying homesteads who couldn't travel to town regularly. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they reluctantly mounted their horses for the return journey to Goldfield. "Will your aunt approve, do you think?" Vincent asked as they rode side by side through a meadow golden with evening light. "She already does," Vanessa replied confidently. "She's been dropping hints about wedding plans for weeks now." Vincent chuckled. "Subtle as a grizzly, remember, indeed." Vanessa smiled. But she's wise about people. She saw what was between us before I fully admitted it to myself. When they reached the boarding house, Martha took one look at their glowing faces and clapped her hands in delight. "Finally," she exclaimed. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the pantry together to get a declaration." "Aunt Martha," Vanessa protested, blushing. Vincent laughed, more relaxed than Vanessa had ever seen him. "Your niece has done me the honor of accepting my proposal, Mrs. Holloway. With your blessing, we'd like to be married before summer's end." Martha embraced them both, tears in her eyes. "Of course you have my blessing. You've had it since I saw the way you looked at each other that first night at dinner." The news spread quickly through Goldfield. Most responses were congratulatory, though some expressed surprise that Vanessa would choose a life in the wilderness over the comforts of town. Martha threw herself into wedding preparations with enthusiasm, while Vincent divided his time between town and his cabin, where he worked feverishly to make improvements before bringing his bride home. June brought a letter from Boston Vanessa's mother, expressing shock at her daughter's rash decision to marry a complete stranger of no background or prospects. Vanessa penned a firm but loving reply, explaining that she had found happiness beyond anything Boston could offer her, with a man whose worth couldn't be measured by Eastern standards of success. "She'll come around eventually," Martha assured her when Vanessa shared the letter's contents. "And if she doesn't, it's her loss. You've found a good man, my dear. Not a perfect one, none of them are, but one who will stand beside you through whatever life brings." In July, Vincent brought Vanessa to see the improvements to the cabin. She was amazed by the transformation. He'd added a proper bedroom with a real bed frame ordered from a carpenter in Virginia City, enlarged the main room, and constructed a covered porch where they could sit on summer evenings. The cabin was still modest by Eastern standards, but to Vanessa, it was perfect. "It's beautiful," she told him, turning in a circle to take it all in. "Truly a home." Vincent watched her, pleasure evident in his expression. "Still more to do. Want to build a proper root cellar before winter, maybe add another room next spring, but it's a start." "It's more than a start," Vanessa assured him, moving into his arms. "It's everything I could want." They were married on a perfect August day in a simple ceremony in Martha's garden behind the boarding house. The entire town seemed to attend, curiosity about the unusual couple overriding any lingering disapproval. Vincent wore a new suit that made him look surprisingly distinguished, though he confessed to Vanessa that he'd never felt more uncomfortable in his life. Vanessa wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha had helped her make, adorned with lace from her mother's wedding dress that had been sent, along with a brief note of reluctant acceptance, just in time for the ceremony. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Vincent whispered as they exchanged vows before the town's minister. Afterward, there was feasting and dancing in the town square. Vincent surprised everyone, including his bride, with his skill on the dance floor. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" Vanessa asked as he guided her confidently through a waltz. A shadow crossed his face, then cleared. "My mother taught me. Said every gentleman should know how to dance, even in Texas. Haven't had much occasion to practice since she died, though." "Well, you've retained the skill admirably," Vanessa assured him, leaning closer. "Though I must confess, I'm rather looking forward to when we can leave the celebration." Vincent's eyes darkened with understanding and desire. "As am I, Mrs. Vaughn. As am I." They departed amid cheers and well wishes, riding together toward their cabin home as the summer sun began its descent. Thunder, adorned with ribbons for the occasion, carried them both, Vanessa seated before Vincent just as she had been on that fateful day when he'd rescued her from the Snowdrift. When they reached the cabin, Vincent helped her down, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Vanessa," he said softly, setting her on her feet inside their dwelling. Vanessa looked around at the simple, beautiful space that would be theirs at the fire, already laid in the hearth, the wildflowers arranged in mason jars on the table. The quilts Martha had given them folded neatly on the new bed visible through the bedroom doorway. "Home," she repeated, turning to face her husband. "I like the sound of that." Their eyes met, and the love that had grown between them over these months, from desperate rescue to friendship to deepening affection to passionate commitment, passed between them without words. Vincent drew her into his arms, and as their lips met, Vanessa knew with absolute certainty that the snowdrift that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her everything she'd ever truly wanted. The years passed, each season bringing new joys and challenges to the Vaughns' life together. Their cabin expanded as their family grew, first with the addition of a son, Joseph, named for Vanessa's father, born the summer following their wedding. 2 years later came Elizabeth, a daughter with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. And 3 years after that, another son, Daniel, completed their family. Vanessa's dream of starting a small school became reality. In a building Vincent constructed near their cabin, she taught not only their own children but those from neighboring homesteads and mining claims. Her reputation as an excellent teacher spread, bringing families from increasingly distant locations seeking education for their children. Vincent continued his trapping and hunting, but also developed a successful business breeding and training horses, his skill with the animals becoming legendary throughout the territory. He never completely overcame his preference for solitude, often disappearing into the wilderness for days at a time when the need for space overwhelmed him. But he always returned with renewed appreciation for the home and family awaiting him. They faced hardships, as all frontier families did: harsh winters, summer droughts, occasional illnesses, the ever-present dangers of wilderness life. But they faced them together, their bond strengthening with each challenge overcome. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent took Vanessa back to Spirit Eye Lake, where he had proposed. They left the children with Martha, now retired from running the boarding house but still a vital part of their lives, and spent a perfect day reminiscing about the journey that had brought them together. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked as they sat by the lake, his arm around her shoulders. "Choosing this life over what you might have had in Boston?" Vanessa looked up at him, at the face that had become more dear to her with each passing year. There were new lines at the corners of his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples, but the strength and kindness that had drawn her to him remained unchanged. "Never," she said with complete honesty. "Not for a single moment. Every day I thank that snowstorm for bringing us together, even though it nearly killed me." Vincent smiled, pulling her closer. "I think about that day often. How close I came to taking a different trail home, how easily I might have missed seeing you. But you didn't," Vanessa reminded him. "You found me. You dug me out of that snowdrift and told me to hold on." "Best thing I ever did," Vincent murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. Vanessa leaned against his solid strength, gazing out over the perfect blue waters of Spirit Eye. Their life together wasn't the one she'd been raised to expect. Wasn't one her mother still quite approved of, despite having visited twice and grudgingly admitted the Vaughns had created a surprisingly comfortable existence. But it was a life rich with meaning, with purpose, with love that had only deepened with the passing years. A life born from a moment of desperate need and heroic response, nurtured through shared hardship and joy, and sustained by mutual respect and unwavering commitment. "I love you, Vincent Vaughn," she said simply, more with each passing day. "And I love you, Vanessa Vaughn," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "You turned a solitary man's life into something far more precious than he ever imagined possible." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the lake in shades of gold and rose, they sat together in the peaceful silence they'd always shared so comfortably. Two souls who had found in each other exactly what they hadn't known they were seeking. In the distance, a wolf howled a sound that might once have frightened Vanessa, but now merely reminded her of the wild beauty of the home they'd made together. She smiled, thinking of the journey from that desperate day in the Snowdrift to this moment of perfect contentment. Life had not been easy, but it had been good, so very good, and it had all begun with 7 simple words. "Hold on to me. I'll get you somewhere safe."